You're famous, Amanda. All right, are we going? All right, so if we talked about production, if we talked about revenue first, what do we have to talk about second? Production, because production leads to cost, okay? Production and costs. Because the two pieces that you have to know when you're talking about profit is how much money did you pull in and how much money did you send out. And Chapter 5, elasticity, was dealing with revenue, right? How much money is coming in. Chapter 6 says how much are we spending to make all of this stuff that we are then going to sell. Because those are the two things that factor into determining whether or not we're making profit, which is the ultimate goal. All right, so first thing that we have to do is get some definitions going down here because, well, just because we need to. So costs and profit. There are two types of costs in the world, according to economists. There are implicit costs and there are explicit costs. I wrote them backwards, so bear with me to some degree. We're going to do explicit costs first. Explicit costs are the things that you actually spend money on, right? Things you spend money on. So when you run a business, what are the things that you actually have to pay for? Labor, that's one of them. Labor, machines, or capital production costs. What else do you have to pay for? Raw materials, right? All the stuff that you actually have to spend for. I mean, and don't forget the other stuff that comes around with owning a business. Overhead, yeah. Exactly. Rent, electricity, utilities. Essentially, kind of. You could throw them in there. But there's stuff that you write a check for, okay? That's what explicit costs are. Normally, we tend to think of these as accounting costs because when you're an accountant, all you care about is the real stuff. All you care about is real, okay? Accountants have no imagination whatsoever. They can't dream of anything that they can't write down in a ledger, which is good and bad, right? I mean, it's good because your whole life is contained in a ledger, right? I mean, you never have to worry about it, right? It's bad because, well, your whole life is contained in a ledger. Again, that's my own personal opinion, so, you know. All right, implicit costs. This is the money you could have earned if you did not run a business. So imagine, if you will, that I'm looking at my own cost structure. Let's suppose that I quit being a teacher at the end of this semester and decide to make whiteboard markers. So I buy a bunch of land in Janesville. I get, a factory that I convert into a whiteboard marker factory, and I start cranking out whiteboard markers. And I hire, say a dozen of you guys to come out and help me, okay? And I'm now earning a business. I'm earning income from my business. Well, we'll negotiate that. Depends on whether you unionize or not. So all of those things that I have to pay for to start my business, those are my explicit costs, right? The money I have to pay for you guys, the insurance policies that I have to pull out for you guys, the rent for my factory, the raw materials I have to buy to make my stuff, the shipping that I have to pay for all of this, the taxes I have to pay, et cetera, right? All that kind of crap. What are my implicit costs for doing that? Remember that I was a teacher before. What do they do? Exactly. Remember that they actually pay me to come here and do this. Sometimes it doesn't maybe seem like it, but They really do. They actually give me a check every 2 weeks. Well, it's not mine, it's my wife's. I know better than to call it my own. Yeah, exactly. Amen, brother. So the implicit costs of me running my business are the fact that I lost my salary from my teaching business. That is actually a cost of me running my business, right? So to determine whether I'm really making a profit when I run my business, one, I have to see how much money did I make, right? So take revenue minus cost, actual dollars and cents. But then I have to compare that number to how much I was making as a teacher. And if that number isn't more than being a teacher, it's a loss. Exactly. If all we care about is money. And again, remember this first half of the class, all we care about is money.
In the book, it's calling it an opportunity cost.
Exactly. This is off an opportunity cost, right? What does it mean? What does opportunity cost mean again?
The comparison between what you have and what you can have.
Essentially, the more booky definition is it's the cost of the next best choice. So if you don't choose to run your own business, what would you be doing otherwise? That has a dollar sign associated to it. That's your opportunity cost. It is also your implicit costs if you actually have, a profit margin that you're trying to hit, right? So here, opportunity cost actually represents a dollar sign that you lost because you decided to quit your job and go. So when you do start your own business, the way to determine if you're actually making any profit is to compare what you would have made if you didn't have your business, right? So if you're making $30,000 or $40,000 off your business per year, but you could go out and get a job that pays you $60,000 a year, are you better off running your own business? No. Exactly. Your real profit or your economic profit is negative, right? So that's where we get into the second side of the coin. The two types of profit, right? So there's two types of costs. There's the real costs, right? I mean, think of these as real, right? I mean, stuff you got to pay for, right? This is the imaginary cost, if you will, or it's the money you could have made. That is a cost. You gave it up. Accounting profit total revenue, which is how much price times quantity, minus your explicit costs. The things they're actually paying for. That's your accounting profit. So most businesses will operate at an accounting profit, okay? Because if they're not getting an accounting profit, then that's when you close the doors, right? Although I do have an example of a company that worked at an accounting profit was perfectly happy to do so. I had a case that one of the other teachers here at BCD over in the business office brought to me and said, here's an analysis of this guy's business. And they wanted to know how he could become profitable, right? And I looked at the numbers the guy put in front of me, and I'm like, well, it looks like you need to fire everybody that works for you and hire people who are more efficient. And the guy looked at me and said, no. So what do you mean, no? He's like, well, no, I can't fire anybody that works here. So how can I be profitable if I keep everybody that I've hired? And, it's like, well, there's no way to do it. I mean, given the way they worked, there was no way that this business could be profitable. I'm like, you should really close down. He's like, well, no, I can't do that either. I'm like, why? He's like, well, okay, let me put you this. The reason that he did this, right, is that there were like 25 people working for him. They were all related, blood-wise, to him. Cousins, nieces, nephews. This guy was also independently wealthy. He had a bunch of other businesses that were extremely profitable. They were making lots of money. But the problem with it is that all of these cousins and nephews and nieces and whatnot, they needed a job. So he would hire them and put them in his profitable businesses, and his profitable businesses became less profitable. So what he did is he grabbed all of them and said, here's a business you guys can all work together at. And that one business was losing him, a couple $100,000 a year. But he was perfectly happy having it there. Because then all of his relatives were in one spot. He knew where they were. They weren't ruining his other businesses. And his other businesses were profitable enough to make up the difference. Only time I'd ever seen a business work in the red here and didn't care. And what does it tell you? That blood is thicker than water, right? It's even thicker than money. Absolutely hilarious story. Every time I read the paper that guy wrote about why he ran a business in the red, I was like, whoa. I'm glad I don't have a whole lot of relatives. And that I'm not rich, or whatever. Anyways, economic profit is slightly different, and you take into account your implicit costs. So the only difference is that you start with your total revenue and you subtract your explicit costs, but you also subtract your implicit costs as well. And that determines whether or not your business is really economically profitable. Because sometimes it's really better off that you close your business and just go work for the man, right? It's no biggie. Again, all of this stuff is very, very, very tied to real dollar values, okay? Exactly, right? But remember that sometimes having an economic profit that's less is actually more profitable from a real life perspective, because in order to run your own business, how many hours do you need to work? Think it only takes 8 hours a day to run your own business? No. Yeah, and you're not taking any days off because it's your business, it's your job, it's your life, right? If you go work for the man and just go get a job, how many work? 5. How many hours do you work? 8 or 9. Don't forget those sorts of things, okay? Now, again, for all intents and purposes in this class, all I care about is which number is bigger, right? So don't take into account the fact that you have to work 20 hours a day to run your own business. As long as you earn more money doing it, you should do it, right? That's what economists say. And that's what we believe a lot of times, is that if it makes you more money, that's what you should be doing, right? So most economists look at me and say, Marshall, you could be a programmer at a medical software company where you're making 6 figures. There's no way you should be staying in a teaching job where you're not going to come anywhere near 6 figures. Am I going to switch? Woo. And there's no way I'm going back, because the implicit cost of actually working up there was a lot of negatives to the money, and it's not always necessarily worth it. So,
Didn't you say they were paying you a salary and you were working over 40 hours a week?
yeah. But again, what do we care about in the end, right? I mean, from this class's perspective, how much money do we have at the end of the day?
If you say what you give up to do business, then is that a definition for implicit cost?
Yeah.
I mean, 'cause, see, starting my own business, it was like that to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting in 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, but as things progress along,
Got a little less.
yeah, you hire people to do some of the things that you're doing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can afford that. So on and so on.
Yeah. But again, I mean, in the end, all you cared about at the end of the day or the end of the month was, what were the dollar signs, right? I mean, you didn't really think about the time. Oh man, take that number, divide it by 2. That's how much it was really worth, right? I mean, sure, I had lots of money sitting around, but if you can't spend it anyways, Or when you do spend it, yeah, you just go somewhere and lay down and sleep for a week straight.
What I'm asking you is that how can you factor in
Those sorts of
what the
things.
future is, as far as input and
That's
the cost?
it's your own personal preference.
To start it out, it might be
Right. Oh no.
huge
Yep. No, I agree.
negative like that gap.
Yep.
But then down the road, say some of his relatives die off. I mean, there's places in which people that actually do the work.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. He had lots more relatives that he was waiting to hire if any of those fell off. So. It was scary. I mean, it was. Oh, anyways, okay. So there's cost and there's profit. Given that this class is an economics class, guess which one of these I care about? Yeah. Okay. So when I talk profit, guys, please realize that I'm always talking about economic profit. All right. Accounting profit, it's important because you need to have enough money to do stuff, but what I'm really talking about when I talk about profit is always economic profit. For the first couple of weeks here, I'll write down economic profit as often as I can, but as we go throughout the rest of the semester, whenever I say profit, think economic profit, okay? So a lot of times I'll tell you that this company isn't making profit. That doesn't mean that their accounting profit is zero. It just means that they're making exactly as much in their business as they would if they had a job somewhere else, okay? So, and there will be times where I tell you they're losing money. All that means is that they're not making as much as they would be if they went out and got a job on their own, okay? So I know when everybody hears the frame loss, they all think, oh my God, they're losing money. They're gonna lose their health care and they're gonna have to become a street person or something. That's not what I mean, okay? If you've got a master's degree in agriculture, you know everything that there is to know about farming. You expect your farm to make you $250,000 a year, right? Because you know how to do all of that stuff, and you know how to maximize profit. You know how to pick the right seed, how to water effectively, how to fertilize effectively, how to herbicide effectively, all that stuff. So you expect your farm to crank out $250,000 a year. So if your farm only makes you $200,000 in one given year, you actually have an economic profit of negative $50,000. That doesn't mean you lost $50,000. It just means you didn't reach your expectations, okay? That's what I talk about when I talk about economic loss. You're not making as much as you could have or you thought you should have, all right? Expectations versus reality, all right? All right, so we are going to run our own business. When you are running a business, right, so we've made this decision that we understand the difference between accounting profit and economic profit. We're going to make that leap. We're going to say, I'm going to start running my own business. One of the first things you have to work on when you're dealing with your business is the difference between the short run in your business and the long run in your business, okay? Again, remember we're talking about production here, folks, so mostly we're talking about costs, all right? So in the short run, you tend to divide your costs into two types of costs. You have fixed costs and you have variable costs. Give yourself room between the two of them because we're going to define them and give examples. A fixed cost is anything you have to pay for even if you decide to turn your business off for a while. All right? Fixed costs are costs you pay even if you produce nothing, zero. So a lot of businesses between Christmas and New Year's, they turn them off. They say, everybody, here's your 2-week vacation, go home, right? Seen people work during the weeks between Christmas and New Year's. You know why they do it. The least productivity in the business world is between Christmas and New Year's. Tired or hungover or both. Or just still, well, enough said. So what sorts of things are in this category? What sorts of things are a fixed cost? Rent, right? And let's put the other side of the coin in there. Or a mortgage, right? Because you may have purchased the band or the factory outright, and instead of renting it, you may have bought it. But normally, if you're going to buy an entire factory, what do you got to do? You got to borrow, right? So you got to pay a mortgage on it, right? One of the two. What else? Utilities. Now I put utilities in quotes. Why did I put utilities in quotes? Because, I mean, there are some utilities that you have to pay even if the factory is not running. But what happened to your utilities if the factory's on? They go up, right? So how do you distinguish between the two? Doesn't matter in the end, but you play around with it. Now, what else do you have to pay for? Yeah, I suppose we could think about that. So, right? I mean, in theory, you're still paying your employees even if they're not showing up. Little question mark about that. What a lot of businesses actually do is they lay their people off at Christmas. They collect unemployment for 2 weeks and then come back. Again, it's a way that employees can get paid but have a vacation. Sneaky, but businesses have been known to do it. My wife's company did that to her a couple years ago. They just said, oh, just take 2 weeks off. And then they said, oh, yeah, by the way, here's the form to fill out to get paid for that 2 weeks. Because we're not going to. Not uncommon, folks. What else do you got to pay when businesses are turned off?
Well, if it's a mortgage,
Yeah. Uncle Sam doesn't go away, folks. Ever. You still got to pay your taxes. Can you think of anything else? Well, let's assume that we're not going to demand any more products, so we're not going to hit our suppliers, and we tell them not to ship during those 2 weeks either. Insurance. Oh, yeah. Why do you need to have insurance? You still want to have fire insurance, and you want to have insurance because if somebody happens to be walking through your parking lot and they trip on one of the turnstiles, right, or one of the little triangle parking lot stops and they fall over and break their leg, what are they going to do? Of course, hello, welcome to the U.S. This is known as the litigious country for not for any reason, right? I mean, you have insurance at all times. It's because people can sue your pants off whenever they want to. All right, so these are the sorts of things you're going to have to pay for even if you decide not to run your business. Okay, so variable costs. Oops, I was doing that in green. These are costs that go up when production increases. And they also go down when production is reduced, right? So it's variable costs. So what's the most obvious one? Well, I guess it's maybe the utilities are in there, supplies or raw materials or whatever you want to call it. What do you got to do with your workforce? Yeah. The number one out there, folks, is labor. That's the number one. Good. Don't forget about stuff like that. Right? If you start producing stuff and you can't ship it right away, you got to store it. They have to have a warehouse somewhere. Granted, that may be a little bit up here too, right? Because if you still have product, right? But probably it's going up as you produce more, right? Probably. It's one of those. That's right, shipping. If you're actually making something, you're going to have to ship it, and you're going to have to pay for it. Probably you're going to have to pay for it. Depends on what kind of contracts you can negotiate. Maintenance, yeah, that's not a bad thing to remember, right? I mean, if you're running machinery, is that machinery going to break?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not, is absolutely right. But is it going to? Yes. Granted, when the machines aren't running, hopefully it's not breaking. I mean, it could, all right? I mean, that's what rust's all about. For those of you who know anything about the GM plant that closed, I mean, what happened when it rained at the GM plant? It flooded always. It was built on a lowlands. It was actually built over a swamp. They didn't do a good job of draining. It's part of why GM closed that plant, was to keep it up. Their maintenance costs were really, really high when they were running the plant because they constantly had to be pumping the water out. And when they didn't pump the water out, then yeah, it was bad news. What else is in here, folks? What else up here keeps happening when you produce more? Yes, Uncle Sam, man. Don't forget about sales taxes, folks. Right? If you're selling this stuff, you got to. The more you make and the more you sell, the more you got to pay Uncle Sam. And let's face it, right? As your labor goes up, what do you got to do? You got to pay unemployment insurance. You got to pay FICA insurance. You have to put all those things, all of those things go into, the tax man coming in, right? Labor has tons of taxes built around it, right? Payroll taxes are. Sometimes it's half of your HR division are doing payroll taxes. Anyways, though, these are the sorts of things that ramp up with your production. Now, the other thing about it here, folks, is that these things that cross over. The reason that we have short run versus long run is that businesses report their costs in two different buckets. Short run buckets and long run buckets, right? Fixed costs versus variable costs. And in order for a business to look attractive to be purchased, what does a business want? They want more fixed costs and less variable costs, right? Because if a business is going to get purchased, they want it to have a higher profit margin, which means that their variable costs have to be smaller. So what businesses do when they want to get sold, they start taking anything that may be sitting in these variable cost buckets and shifting them into the long-run buckets as much as possible. You will discover in businesses that are looking to get purchased that their utilities are all up here in fixed costs, period, right? All of their taxes that they're paying wind up here in the long-run taxes because it makes them look more saleable. And again, on the other side of the coin, what if a business doesn't want to look like it's profitable, that they want to stay in control? They don't want people to buy it. You go the opposite direction, right? All of your utilities are variable, period, right? We never shut down. Therefore, all of our utilities are variable. Bam, right? All of the taxes we pay are based on some part of our production. Therefore, all of our taxes are variable. All of the rent and mortgage. A lot of times people will say, well, we're constantly buying more land. Therefore, this should really be down here. I mean, that's what businesses do, right? Their whole goal is to earn the people money. And it all depends on what kind of money they're trying to earn, right? Are they trying to earn money from producing things, or are they trying to earn money by selling themselves off? And you adjust and play the game accordingly, okay? Is it legal to do that? Oh, I don't care about legal. All I care about is making the most amount of money possible, right? Legal should be something in there that's probably an insurance cost, right? You can think of it that way, right? That's why you have legal departments in your business, so that if you do get caught doing something that's not quite so legal, you then have the lawyers who are quote-unquote insurance. They back you up, okay? Businesses is very, very, very sneaky. Don't ever feel sorry for business people, okay? The bigger your business becomes, the more this becomes a game you play very well, okay? Small businesses, can they do this kind of stuff? Could you do this? Not so much, but you tried, right? But that was because you couldn't afford, yeah. Yeah, uh-huh. Amen, brother. That's right. So, is Is the difference between short run and long run that big of a deal? You know, from an economist perspective, no, but from the real world perspective, it's huge because it's, you know, it can drive where your business is going to go. All right. When you get into business classes, you will talk way the hell more about this. I'm just pointing it out to you. All right. So, what's the difference? I mean, in the short run, all you're trying to do is maximize your profit. So you're adjusting where your costs are going and whatnot. The long run, this is what's known as the la-la time frame. That's not a phrase from the book. This is what's known as wishful thinking. If your business could be any size that you wanted it to be, in the long run, you can make it that. Okay? So if right now it's really good for your business to be producing just a small amount of product instead of a large amount, you want to have a nice small factory that cranks out however much you need in the most efficient manner possible. If for some reason the business is going to change in such a way that you need to produce, in the long run, you can change the size of your factory so that you can units a day and make this product over and over and over and over again to take advantage of the fact that demand is really high and the price is really high, right? That's the long run. What economists say about the long run is that there's no fixed costs. Nothing is fixed in the long run. In the long run, you can change anything, all right? So essentially, everything becomes variable. Okay, so one of the things that businesses have to keep in mind is the law of diminishing returns. What do you think the law of diminishing returns is? Except it's more, think of it more from a production perspective instead of a dollar sign perspective. So you're hiring people, right? They're not producing as much. That's essentially what's correct. The book definition is that at some point, marginal product becomes negative. That's the book definition for what law of diminishing returns is that at some point in time, marginal product will become negative. Now, what's marginal product? Well, let me give you an example. This is one of my favorite stories of all time, so bear with me. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. Just bear with me and don't think ill. All right, so this is a production question, all right? So the idea, marginal product, here's a quick definition. Marginal product is how much one worker adds to production. That's what marginal product is in layman terms. Again, the book has a long definition that's really talks about division and all this other crap. Nah. Marginal product is just how much does one person add to overall production, all right? So in other words, if you hire 10 people and you produce 2,000 units in a day, and you hire one more person, and that next day you produce 2,200 units, the marginal product of that 11th person is the 200 units that they added to overall production. That's it. That's what marginal product is. All right, so to demonstrate it, let me show you my favorite example. This is a great story, and it's mostly because it's almost true. Usually my stories are lies, but sometimes they're true, or they're based on a hint of truth. And this one's actually true, so bear with me to some degree. All right, so one of the things that happened to me like 5 or 6, well, no, more like 10 or 15 years ago now, was that my brother and I, we went to church, and we were in church, and of course, as we walked into the entrance of the church, there was a bucket sitting in front of the doorway, and guess what was happening in the bucket? Oh, no, it was worse than that. Water was sitting at the bottom of the bucket. Guess why? There was a leak in the roof. That's what I was hoping first, too, but this bucket was really kind of gross. Anyways, it was sitting underneath the roof, and you could see in the top of the tiles in the roof in the entranceway, there was a whole bunch of water sitting there. It was just drip, drip. What did we need to do? We needed to fix the roof. Well, if you've ever been in a church, churches mostly are nonprofit organizations, so do they make a whole lot of money? No. So they had a weekly bulletin that said, if you would like to donate money to fix the roof in the entryway, please, fill out your donation envelope and say fix the roof, and guess how much money they'd collected from that? About $2.50. $2.50. Yeah. So what the pastor told me, he's like, Marshall, how about you spearhead getting the roof fixed in the church? And I said, oh, okay, tell you what. I've got like 5 or 6 weekends free here this summer. I'll run a car wash. I mean, isn't that what you see all the time, is people saying car wash to, go to Washington, D.C. with my school or whatever. And mine was fix the leaky roof at my church car wash, right? So what I did is I said, workers, output. I said, okay, Pastor, I'll go ahead and do this. I'm Lutheran, or I was Lutheran, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, I started to figure out how I was going to do this. I said, okay, great. I had a friend who owned a service station, and he's like, Marshall, yeah, you can use my parking lot. I even got water for you. I can give you buckets and sponges. No problem, right? I even have soap in the back that you can use to wash cars. I'll let you use it. That'll be his semi-donation to the church fund. I was like, woohoo, yay. So, I got myself set up, and I'm like, okay, now I looked for volunteers. And it was like 2 days before I went to wash my first set of cars. So it was like Friday afternoon. 2 days before you're going to do something, guess what everybody said?
Can't do it,
I'm busy, yeah. Even my brother, little stinker. He's like, my kids have soccer. And I'm like, all day? He's like, yeah, because he's got 3 girls. So it's like, well, one of them's at, 10:30, the next one's at noon, and then the following one's at 3. So, by then, you'll be done, and sorry. I was like, okay, fine. But, I had the space rented from my friend, and so I said, oh, I'll just do it myself, right? So I hired myself. And I went out there to wash cars, and I put up a sign on one street that said, help the Emmanuel Lutheran car wash, fix the roof type of thing. And I made 2 of those. I put them up on the side of the road. And, I got on my most alluring outfit that I could think of. Because, you got to advertise a little bit, right? So I put on the really short shorts. I had them. They still fit. Oh, yeah, baby. They were great. They were lime green, and they were form-fitting. This was 15 years ago, okay, so there was some form at that time. Anyways, so I put on my lime green shorts. I took my shirt off, and mind you that I'm really pale. And I blinded traffic as I walked around saying, hey, come get your car washed. But I tried it, right? So from 10 a.m. until about 4 in the afternoon, I washed cars. And I asked for, like a $5 donation, maybe $5 or $10, I forget what it was. But anyways, I washed 10 cars. I mean, that's not too bad, right? I mean, if you think about it, I'm a guy. Although the shorts were form-fitting, you would have stopped. Anyways, I washed my cars on Saturday, and on Sunday I came into the pastor, and I was like, let's suppose I did it for $10. So I had $100 in my hand, and I walked up to the pastor. I'm like, look, dude, here's $100 for the roof. And what did the pastor do when he saw $100? Cried. Yeah, basically, he was like, wow, $100? That's amazing. Thanks, Marshall. That was great. You need to keep doing this. And I said, Okay, because I'm thinking $100 was nothing, right? That was when I learned that he'd only collected $2.50 so far. So I was like, oh, cool. So I looked like I was a stud, right? So next weekend, though, I got a full week to get people to help. Guess who helped me next weekend? Hell yeah, there was no way he was getting out of this one. I talked to his wife and I said, can you handle all of the soccer matches on Saturday next week? She's like, oh yeah, sure, I could have done it this week. And I was like, so when I went and asked this time, I made sure that his wife was in the room. And when I asked, he's like, well, I got soccer. She's like, oh no, you don't need to do it. And he's like, oh yeah, great, I can help. So next week, there were two of us, right? Brother was included. Got him hook, line, and sinker. Went down to the service station. Still two guys, but 15 years ago, we're in our 20s, folks. His were lemon yellow though, mine were lime green, but we had the shorts on. They were short. Well, yeah. I mean, we weren't cross wrestlers. That's what we were. So I got wrestler body, man. Anyway, so my brother and I are out there, and again, what we tended to try and do was one person advertised, the other person tried to get cars organized. And again, we were thinking there were going to be lots of cars showing up, and so we took turns walking around. We made a third sign, one that you carried, and we did a lot of this. We did a lot of this, and my brother and I are severe hams, so it was really bad. I mean, it got carried away. So we did get it. We did do fairly well. The weather was still, very nice to us, and we washed 22 cars in that 6-hour time frame. And we were pretty good about it, right? I mean, when one of us was washing, right, the other one was out trying to drum more business up. Once we had a row of cars going, the person who was working it would put it down and help with the washing and the collecting, and we were a well-oiled machine, right? And we didn't make too many bad jokes. We just kind of did our work, right? Because we've been around each other too long. Regardless, we did a good job, right? 22 cars, $220. Went to the pastor on Sunday the next day, gave him $220. What did he do? You should have seen the dollar signs light up in his eyes, right? He's like, wow, you got to get more people and do that again next week. I'm like, yeah, I got it all lined up. My wife is not out of town next week. She's in. Next week, wife and bro, 3 workers. Now we had somebody carrying a sign, and it wasn't a guy. And this is 15 years ago, so my wife was even younger. Wow. Anyways, she got out the bikini, she worked it. It was nice. I admit that I was mildly distracted, but whatever. It's okay. I was married to her at that time. So she did the walking, and my brother and I did the washing, and we were good at it, right? I mean, we divided the car into halves. He did the left half, I did the right half, right? So that there wasn't a whole lot of us getting in the way of each other. But we washed the cars whenever they were in. When there was a line, we would wash a little bit faster. We worked really well together, right? But unfortunately, if the two of us are always working together and we're brothers, what eventually happens? Well, you live with your brother long enough, and eventually you're going to get annoyed by him, right? So it's like, I'm like, dude, keep it on your side of the car, and then the water sprays start happening, and whatever. Anyways, we still did better, right? We washed 33 cars. Because we were still, we still didn't screw around when there was 4 or 5 cars in a row, but when there were 2 or 3, we kept screwing around, right? And whenever you have 2 people that are working together, what are those 2 people going to do? They're going to chat, right? So we would talk more, whereas when it was just one of us washing and one of us walking around, there was no chatting going on. There was no loss of productivity. Here, there was loss of productivity to some degree. But anyways, we survived that week, came into the pastor, gave him $330. What did the pastor do? Hallelujah! It probably only cost $2,000 or $3,000 to fix the ceiling as it was, right? How close are we? We've collected, $600 some odd dollars. Just have one good weekend. And I'm like, I got it lined up. My parents live in the same town as my little brother does. We did back then at that time. So the next week, and I was like, Mom, Dad, can you guys take the kids to soccer and, and tumbling and gymnastics and blah, 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 you name it, right? I mean, you guys got kids, So my mom and dad are like, sure, no problem. So when I went next week over to ask my brother if he wanted to help with the car wash, I was in with the wife as well. I was like, oh, Missy, don't you want to come join Marston? She's like, no, I got to do the kids. I'm like, nope, I already got my parents signed up for it. And she's like, in. I got my sister-in-law in it. Now I've got 2 women. Oh, we were in like Flynn, baby. Because now you could have one of the women helping wash every now and then. And let's face it, right? If you've got a woman with sudsy water floating around, oh yeah, things are a little bit better. So one of them was always walking around trying to work it, right? Sell it, get people in line. And once the line got long enough, they were both out there helping with the washing. We had fun. It was a blast. And did people get sprayed and wet? Hell yeah. Did the people in the car mind? Nah. We had ourselves some fun. It was a good weekend. We washed 42 cars in that little 6-hour span. We were smooth, right? It was just a blast. We had a great time. When we walked into the pastor, gave him $420. He's like, oh, awesome. But then he looked and said, wait, you had your brother, then you had your wife, now you have your brother's wife. He's like, well, where are you going to get somebody from now? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I can get anybody else. He's like, tell you what, I'll put an ad in the bulletin asking anybody from the church to help. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Probably, right? Yeah, but of course, then he has to do printing, change printing, and those bulletins are not cheap, blah, blah, whatever. Anyways, he's seeing the money. He's like, all right, so in the bulletin for next week, and we get ourselves a 5th worker. And it's Fran. Fran, who's really a guy, his name's Francis. He's a nice guy, great guy. He's 92 years old. Nice guy, great guy at the church, right? He's the guy that's got the walker, Well, he's helping. Exactly, right? So, well, yeah, that's so at first we're like, well, Fran, it's like, well, what do you want to do, Fran? He's like, well, I can help. I can do whatever you need me to do. And I'm like, great, you want to help wash? He's like, well, I can't stand up for more than about 2 or 3 minutes without the walker. And I was like, well, okay, how fast? I know how fast you can move. Well, tell you what, you collect the money, right? That was sort of what we decided Fran was going to do. And I was like, great, perfect. So, so the girls go out, they're doing the advertising thing. My brother and I were waiting for the first car to show up. First car shows up, no problem. Get the car, start washing the car, and the guy wants to pay, and I'm like, no, see the guy out at the exit, Fran, he'll take your money. And the guy drives out, and I'm waiting for the next car to come in because of course the wives are out there. They've got a big line already. It doesn't take much, women. So the next car pulls up, and we're washing the second car, and the first car's still sitting over there, and we're washing, and you wash, and finish that car, and it pulls up behind the other car and sort of waiting for their car, and I'm like, we washed an entire car, and Fran hadn't collected the money yet, and so, I'm like, there's another car waiting. I'm like, Marston, that's my little brother. I'm like, you better take this one. I'll go see what Fran's doing. So I walked over to Fran, and I'm like, Fran, what's going on? He's like, and the guy in the car, of course, is sitting in the car waiting, and I walk over to the guy, and I'm like, what's going on? He's like, well, I gave him a 20. I'm like, okay, did he give you $10? He's like, no. I'm like, Fran, what are you doing? He's like, $10. Yeah, that's how much. So I go to the till, and I see the 20. I'm like, okay, so I grab the 10, I go over and I give it to the guy, and it's like, well, Fran, you $10 and to 20. He's like, I wasn't sure how much I was supposed to give him. I'm like, well, okay, Fran. If they give you a 20 again, just get 10 back. And I'm like, okay, great. And so, I go back to the car, and I'm started washing. The next car pulls up, and sure enough, we sort of finished the third car, and the second car hasn't left yet. And I'm like, Fran's standing next to the window, and I go over there, and Fran's like, I need $10. And the guy's, no, I already gave you $10. He's like, no, you got to give me 20 so I can give you 10 back. Yeah, literally 2 hours of constantly trying to get Fran to understand how paying and change works. Anyways, we washed 40 cars that day. Fran didn't help much.
Fran actually hurt you.
Wonderfully nice guy. I love Fran to no end, folks. He is awesome. Wonderfully nice guy to talk to, tell you stories about the 20s. Great guy. But enough said. Anyways, so this whole example, the whole point is, how do you figure out the marginal product of each one of the workers? Not multiply this time. Remember what marginal product is. Look at the definition. How much did each person add to production? How much did 12? Well, first of all, how much did I add? 10, because before what we were making? 10. He added 12. How much did my wife add? 11. How much did my brother's wife add? Right, so you're just subtracting from, what's 40 minus 42? -2. So my brother was by far the best addition. Notice that while my wife helped production, did my wife help as much as my brother did? No, because of course you throw a woman into a working field and what happens? I'm just kidding. Had nothing to do with it. All right. You can use negatives for this part of economics, folks. They understood the fact that production could actually go down when you hire people. Folks, and I should be careful with that. Marginal product starts to fall. Change that definition to what law of diminishing returns is. It's not that the marginal product is negative. It's where it starts to fall, where the additional product that anyone adds is less than the one before them. That's where you look for your margins. Before you go, one last question. How many of these people should I hire to volunteer and run the car wash? 4. Why 4?
Because the fifth started getting negative.
The 5th made it negative. Why do I keep hiring my sister-in-law? Yeah, for one, blood's thicker than water. She still added to production, right? Gave us the most output. When you have volunteers, folks, you get as many as you can until you get to Fran. Okay? You keep getting more volunteers, because how much do you pay a volunteer?
Nothing.
If this was a real business, I would have to be paying my workers a certain amount of money. That's how businesses work, is they say, oh, where does this number start to become less than the amount of cost it takes to hire them? All right? We'll get into that in a little bit when we start talking about profit. That's enough for today, though. This is the beginning of Chapter 6. We'll finish it on Monday. Turn me off. Is it off already? Yeah, that thing will shock you. Be aware.